Welcome to episode 8.
I think it's 8, yeah.
So, all right, you were saying?
Well, oh, life, yes, experimenting. Life as an experiment. I guess the alternative to that we often do is strategy, life as a strategy. But what I've been learning is when I don't achieve my goals, I end up regretting pursuing the goal, or at least I can. It's always sometimes to some degree, right? I've been noticing that when I approach life as an experiment, which is consistent with my whole thing about being the scientist and the guinea pig, and life as a art form. The thing about the arts is that true art is an experiment. It's like if it's not an experiment, then it's a routine. Maybe that's the alternative to life as an experiment is life as a routine. And so what I've noticed is that when I'm doing something that I don't already know how to do, I can't. It's not a routine thing. It has unknown elements in it. Then I'm experimenting with, can I learn how to do it? Kind of like with you and your project with the bike thing. It's like there's tons of stuff in that you don't know yet. But there's
Yeah.
only one way to find out, and that's get on with the doing of it. But what happens for me is I tend to, when I get on with the doing of it, is that the doing is not an experiment. The doing is like doing it, like already know how to do it. And then when it doesn't, when it turns out to be an experiment, and there's stuff I didn't know that I have to learn, then it's depressing, disappointing, and I have trouble with those experiences. It kind of throws me for a loop. It's I think it's related to manic depressive. That when I'm pursuing something, I tend to be manic, and but then the other side of the mountain of being manic is depression, because when something sticks a stick in the spokes of what I'm being manic about, then I just kind of flip.
Well,
But
can
if
we
I
go back a little bit? Because
Sure,
there's a lot. You already said a ton we can dig into here.
yeah,
So, like, going back to what you first said is that when you try something new and you fail, it makes you regret um, trying in the first place, right?
yeah,
And so I've been through this a couple times. That career change I made with software engineering, that's like the hardest thing I've ever done by far.
right,
And that was super stressful. So I learned a little bit about that whole thing, and I think there's a really hard balance between you have to be hard enough on yourself to where when things get discouraging or a little overwhelming, you sort of stick to your guns
yeah,
and keep moving forward,
sure.
even if it's these little micro steps at a time, right? These
Incremental
gradual
iterations, yeah,
improvements, right?
yeah,
And you have to dedicate yourself to where if you decide you're going to do something, that's why for I made a commitment where I'm not going to start anything new unless I commit to it fully for a year.
yeah,
So, yeah, so that's what I've been doing. And then on the other hand, like if you do try something and you do give it your all, and it turns out not to be the right thing for you, you fail or something like that, you have to give yourself credit for taking the risk in the first place, right? And not feeling like a failure. So you have to have some sort of sense of self-empathy and self-forgiveness for the times you do fail, right? Because that's part of life. Everyone's going to fail.
well, I
But you have to
I
give yourself credit
agree.
for taking the risk in the first
I,
place.
I agree completely with your advice on that, and for me, that's a process. And when the most recent thing was with the consulting group that I was wanting to put together, and so what's happened eventually here is that I've come to realize just exactly what you just said. Um, that When I put it in the context of it was an experiment, I knew all along that I was doing something that I hadn't done yet. And therefore, there were things that I didn't know about what I was doing. And so I was aware. I can remember that I had had conversations with myself about that it's worth finding out, And so the process of pursuing creating that enterprise inspired me enough to make it worth finding out if I could create it. Okay, well, what we found out is that I couldn't create it soon enough because I ran out of juice with the heart attack. I ran out of juice, and it wasn't worth pursuing any further. And I put all that content in the context of it was an experiment, which I think is an honest attitude to have toward it, because I had those conversations with myself, so I wasn't completely delusional, but it still put me through an emotional process, kind of a crash and burn process. But I always resurrect. This isn't the first time that I've had a major setback, and or failure, we can call it that too. But it seemed like so I'm looking for, well, where could I made better choices? And it wasn't in the past that I could make better choices. It's in the present that I could make a better choice, and that is keep the High Point Consulting Group in the context of it was an experiment. And the only reason why I'm not doing the incremental iterations that you were just talking about, just take it one little tiny step at a time and just keep cranking on the thing, is that pursuing the creation of that enterprise, the consulting group as an enterprise, pursuing that doesn't it's not worth it. It's like it doesn't matter to me now, and it's not worth the effort that I'd have to put into it. It's not worth the change in my lifestyle that I would have to make to stay committed to that anyway. So the only reason why I'm not pursuing it now is because of it's not worth it. But for as long as it was worth it, up until it wasn't worth it anymore, that was an experiment to see how far I could go. And I made a good living, while I was trying to build this enterprise. And so there's, as with all things, there's all failures have some degree of success. But my point is, I keep camouflaging what I'm trying to say here with too many words. My point is that in looking back at it, if I remember that it was an experiment to begin with, then it's like, okay, I failed to build that enterprise, but the experiment didn't fail. In fact, for me, experiments can't fail because it's an experiment, right? So it's to find out, and whatever it is we find out, then that's it. The experiment is still succeeding. So anyway, and I was noticing how all that I'm talking about here is it's part of that personal agency thing of venturing out to create. Entrepreneurism is about agency. We're not taking a ready-made job description and filling that job description as a way of living our life. We're creating something, right? And if we're creating something, it's an art form. And if we're creating something, it's also necessarily an experiment. So I think what happened is I forgot.
You forgot what?
I forgot that it was an experiment.
Oh, okay.
And so what was so upsetting for me and disappointing and demoralizing was that I had forgotten what I was doing. I was experimenting. I had the emotional attachment to it as if it was something that I knew how to do, like go buy a loaf of bread. And it wasn't that. And even at the time, I was aware of the fact that I didn't know how to do it, that I was learning how to do it. But then when it got to this certain point, shift from the mania to the depression, then it all kind of caves in.
That's I guess that's life, right? Taking calculated risks. I mean, you're not really going to achieve anything without taking risks. You always have to risk failure.
Well,
right?
I wouldn't say we're not going to achieve anything, but there are a lot of things that cannot be pursued without the risk of not making it. And yeah, that's a big part of life, especially if we're going to take on something that's like competitive. In this case, we're competing against the circumstances and my ability to learn and even my ability to maintain enthusiasm about what I'm doing. So, yeah, it's a big part of life that, but there's something in here though about the agency thing, and also what I've learned is that the people who select a role and they fill that role, a symbolic thing that they're doing, and that scratches their itch, it floats their boat, it brings them satisfaction, they're content with it. There ain't nothing wrong with that. But there are some of us who find our contentment, our homostasis, right? We find it by doing things that we don't know how to do yet.
Yeah, well, you kind of, when you're starting something new, you sort of encounter, like, what would you call it? A smaller form of all the normal human existential stuff, right?
Right.
Because you have the fear of the unknown, you have the fear of failure, you have ambiguity, right?
Right.
There's no set path, laid out before you already, so you have to kind of chart your territory yourself.
That's right.
Which means you have to engage your own personal will and all the guilt and weird existential stuff associated with being willful and making choices and having responsibility and stuff. So,
and
yeah,
for me, add disappointment in there, because it's turning out that disappointment is a huge thing for me. But those are all part of the risk. The disappointment is part of the risk, right?
I think I've always had that attitude about the experiment stuff, because I've tried a lot of different things in the past.
Sure.
And to me, it's, if it works out, it works out. If it's not, sometimes I just get into it and I realize I'm just boring. I don't really like it, so
Yeah.
I just won't.
Right.
It didn't catch on, so it's fine. So I don't have that self judgment thing. I think I'm okay, because like I said, the software career thing was a huge risk. I quit my job, pulled my pension, sold all my toys and shit. And then moving here was from Seattle, Texas. That was pretty risky. Because we bought a house here and I resigned before I had another job to replace it, and so I took a risk knowing my job market. I figured it should be pretty easy for me to find something else. Once I got over
right.
it, which it was. But yeah, I think on the flip side of what you're saying, like the more you take these risks and succeed, you kind of you get familiar with the territory, at least on like in a personal emotional level,
right?
Not really the territory out there, but yeah, like with me, one of the big thing is discouragement, because I'm used to things. I want things to go right fast, right? I want to achieve things very fast. I want to understand things instantly. Like when things don't come naturally to me, and I have to actually sit there and work hard to sort of gain understanding or figure something out. Like I get discouraged and frustrated really fast, right?
Yeah.
And so I have to make sure that I don't quit. I have to take a break, go for a walk, do whatever I need to do, but I have to manage my emotions and my mind in a way that's gonna,
Right. I think I recognize
yeah.
what you're saying there. So you used the word discouraged. And I'm thinking that sounds a lot like what I'm calling disappointment. But discouraged might be a better term for me to be using, because discouraged means, loss of courage, right? Which is the willingness to function while afraid is my definition of courage. And afraid that this is a waste of time, afraid that it isn't going to work. Yeah.
Right.
And I think that could be the trigger point when things shift from the manic to the depression side of things, is when we start encountering evidence that is demonstrating or proving to us that something isn't working. And then what happens is, for me, is sometimes I go to that, grind it out, stay committed to the thing. But then other times, honestly, well, let's stop and take a look at this, to make an assessment. But then it turns into I lose track of what I'm trying to do, and and
Yeah.
and it spins out into the discouragement. Uh,
Yeah, I go through that a lot. Like the tapes start running. Like, why am I doing this? It's even worth it. I'm not gonna be able. It's not gonna make any difference. I'm gonna fail. Whatever. Like that. The tapes start running, and then that's when you start getting really discouraged. What I do is I try to like sort of recap. Okay, why did I get into this in
uh-huh.
the first place? What was my original motivation? And I try to go back to
Yeah, yeah,
where I was when I
to the
first started.
genesis of it.
Right. Yeah, and then reconvince myself of the logic of what I'm doing, and the value of what I'm doing. If I can go back to, what motivated me to start something in the first place, and I can sort of recapture that, when I start getting the heavy discouragement, and it helps me keep moving forward, I think.
Yeah, and I'm wondering about. I'm going to go into a nuance here a little bit, but hang on to my tail so I don't get lost. Um, when you say that you convince yourself, and for me, I see that more as that it convinces me by reviewing the truth of what what am I actually doing here, right? Just being honest and transparent with myself about where did this thing start, what was the intent, which defines what it is I'm doing here, and just reviewing that the truth the truth about myself, because that's all about myself. Why am I doing this? What did I start with? That's all about me. And by just being honest with myself, the truth about myself, it's not even so much convinces, it re-inspires. It regenerates that original enthusiasm. And but here's the thing: a lot of times when I go through those dark spaces, I come out the other side better informed because I learned something in that dark space. Is when we see the light that it's in the dark that we see the stars with which to guide our lives, and dark night of the soul, kind of thing. And so yeah, it's just I I don't see it as something that I'm convincing myself of, um, like in my own cleverness. I don't because I don't trust that. But it's the truth. The truth sets us free. The truth about myself by just taking a moment to reflect and be honest with myself about what's going on, then it it convinces me. It recreates the enthusiasm. Like, okay, I'm ready to go.
And there is kind of a flip side. There's always like a shadow,
Sure. Yep.
like shadow side.
Yep. There's that
Whereas,
too.
like, I guess the opposite of what I'm talking about when you like, or what we're both talking about right here, where you kind of revisit what your motivation was in the first place and try to remember what the logic was for starting something, and then you sort of get back into the okay, now I remember why, and it helps you through the discouragement. There's also a part that when you're doing something that's not healthy for you, you rationalize, right?
Uh huh.
You rationalize it away, like why you're doing it. You justify you're doing it with like, I don't know,
Yeah, Jason.
rationale. Yeah, so I think the point of what I'm saying is like I mentioned earlier. So there's a balance between keeping yourself disciplined and moving forward and dedicated to what you started, and then being able to empathize with yourself and forgive yourself for failing and stuff like that, right?
Right.
And so there's this other thing about keeping yourself motivated during discouragement, going back and understanding the reasoning why you started. There's that, versus the dark side of that would be rationalizing a behavior that's not doing you any good, right? Just because
Yeah.
that's what you're comfortable doing.
So that's
And so
that's
it's like,
another variable or hazard in doing something creative. Like
yeah.
what
So
we're talking about.
there's just you have to develop a more nuanced sort of ability to remain objective and try to understand. Because you can have a tool of being completely dedicated. You can dedicate yourself into an early grave, right? It's not healthy for you, right?
Right.
So it's kind of like you have to have some sort of balance. And so, how do you trust yourself? How do you know that you're making the right decisions? Where if you quit, are you quitting because you're being weak, or are you quitting because
Because it's
this
smart.
is the right thing to do, right?
Yeah.
It's a smart thing to do, right?
Yeah.
And so, God, you're in constant battle with yourself, almost trying to maintain this balance, and you have to be extremely objective, towards yourself and understanding yourself and self awareness in order to to really achieve that kind of balance. It's tough.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
And then all of this that we're talking about fits under the umbrella of what we've talked about in the past around choosing your own path, as compared to accepting a social role, and particularly exercising your agency. And so we're talking about the the details and nuances of the the existential challenges of agency is what we're talking about. With a specific example of what we've talked about in a more general way in the past.
Yeah, and like there's a lot of people want like a simple answer to something, right?
Yeah,
Where a lot of times it's not simple. Things are nuanced and they're complicated, and there's what do they call them, those variables. There's a certain kind of compounding variables, right, to everything.
yeah.
And so nothing is really what it seems, and so you have to yeah.
Well, and also one of I think a really significant question that you've asked before that I think is worth kind of delving into more depth on, and that's what we're doing today, is the one about morality. And how do we create our own morality and not just comply to whatever somebody else has created, right? When we find out that our perspective is fallible, and that life often things aren't what we think they are, right?
Yeah.
So if we're honest with ourselves about our fallibility, then how do we create a morality for ourselves? Whether we create a morality for ourselves by selecting what somebody else gives us, well, we know our perspective is fallible, so that might be on erroneous information that we're accepting somebody else's morality, or we create our own morality and we know that our perception is fallible, so it could still be fallible.
Well, I think what okay, so you said if you're honest with yourself about your inability to sort of suss these things out, right? I think that's the perfect start, because maybe there is no answer, right? There is no solid answer. Maybe it's fluid, never changing. But I think what you said there about being honest with yourself about your own ignorance, your own confusion, your own biases and stuff like that, at least if you understand that you don't know shit, right? And you're confused and it's all, ambiguous and terrifying to you, at least like you're listening you're watching, your mind's open for new information because you understand that you don't understand. And you're looking for information in reality to help you understand it. So you maintain sort of this more objective state. You're not projecting an ideology on the world or a conclusion about the world. You're watching and listening for information you can use to help, develop your own worldview or sense of morality. So I guess maybe that's the best we can do. Is our intention is to develop a system of morality or an ethical way of living, but also know that our conclusions could be completely biased. We don't know shit, and so we constantly need more information.
Yes, and I agree with what you're saying there. I agree, as in I see the same thing you're describing, and with an emphasis on intention, because intention is something that's a matter of choice. An awful lot of the time, I can create my intention. I can create it from nothing. I can just decide that my intention is to be the best human being that I can be, for which I'm using my ethics as a way to do that, because morality is only a tool. It's a means for something, right? And as we're discussing here, we're talking about one's own success as a human being. So my intent is to be true to my potential as a human being, to be a good human being, to be good at being a human being. And that's my intent. And then I'm guessing at what morality or what ethics would support me fulfilling my intention. So the part I'm guessing at is because it's influenced by perception. But my intention, I seem to have a more direct leverage about my intent, and so there's less variable there. It seems to me.
Yeah, and then you mentioned another thing that kind of illustrates or can get people to like kind of an experiential understanding of what we're talking about is like the golden rule, right? Treat others how you want, or how what is it?
Well, the golden rule is to treat others as you want to be treated.
Right, but then you say,
And then the platinum rule is do unto others as others would have you do unto them. So if we
right,
treat people the way people want to be treated, within our ethos, I mean, there's some people that want me to do things that I just wouldn't be willing to do. But those are kind of remote, exceptional things. But if I'm always interacting with you according to who you are, and in respect and honoring the truth, the substantive truth of that you exist, and I'm honoring that and how I interact with you, then I'm in a better place than if I'm projecting onto you that you want the same thing
right.
I
So the
want.
golden rule seems a little bit narcissistic then too, right? Because if
The golden
you
rule.
can treat others how you want to be treated, right? I could be a masochist, I don't think other people want to be treated like shit, right? So,
Yeah. I had never made that connection. It's the cornerstone of narcissism. Back to the rationalizing,
right.
and I think.
But it's easy.
Well, it's easy. It's easy to the extent that it's easy to understand what we want and what our values are.
Right.
But I can treat you in accordance to my values and know nothing about you. It doesn't require that I know anything about you.
Right.
And that's basically what we have going on in a very major way in our society, is we have so many people projecting their values onto other people and expecting other people to respond differently to that projection than what they expect to get from that projection.
Yeah.
And it's usually in a moral tone, that you're morally obligated to follow my morals.
It always seems like the ideal. So if we put the platinum rule as the ideal, right?
Uh-huh.
It always seems like the ideal is never simple or easily won, right? It's always like hard fought. It always exists like through the fire in some ways, where you have to burn off parts of your own bias and delusion. There's always pain and growth in achieving anything ideal. It's never easy. It's never obvious, at least. It is always seems more confusing and more nuanced than.
Yeah. Well, I think
simple.
sometimes there's ideals that we're able to execute with relatively minimal. Let's take the ideal of buying a loaf of bread. There's a few variables in that, but that one's more routine rather than experiment. But but what we're talking about here isn't the routine stuff. The ideals that can be fulfilled with routine. We're talking about ideals that we don't know how to do yet. We don't know how to live up to this ideal of treating people in accordance to how they want to be treated, which incidentally is the essence of love. We don't. My motto of being do what your love would do. I don't say that because we all know how to do it. I'm just saying that that's the thing to walk through the fire to learn how to do.
Yeah.
That it's worth going through that trouble of learning how to do it. So yeah, I think I agree with you that's just the nature of ideals. That if it's not an ideal for which we already have a routine, then it's an ideal that we're going to have trouble pulling through to reality.
Yeah, and I think if our biggest obstacle against seeing reality, if that's possible, is our own narcissism, I think, and our own arrogance a lot of the time.
Arrogance
Right?
is a very important word there.
Because we're always projecting ourselves into reality, right?
Uh-huh.
We're forcing reality into a construct that's comfortable for us.
Well, or we're trying.
Yeah, we're trying to, right? And we're never going to achieve any sort of insight into the nature of reality if we're doing that. And so this is where we kind of get back to failure. Failure is very good for gaining perspective, learning about your limitations, right? Sort of undoing some of the narcissism and arrogance, I think. And maybe some of this.
I agree, because the remedy for arrogance is humility,
Right.
and failure is an excellent opportunity to tune up our capacity for humility. There's something very humble about it. Was an experiment. I didn't have control over this. I was doing something that I didn't know how to do. Therefore, it was an experiment. Now, I can go two ways there. I can go, and that's what I was doing, which is true in this case. Or I can say, well, I'm a friggin' idiot for trying it. And there's a choice right there that is it's got a big yellow flag on it.
I think I'm a fucking idiot could be really positive, right? If you're not like
well, if you're a compassionate drill sergeant, yeah, I would agree.
Well, yeah, it's like if I say I don't know shit,
yeah,
because I don't know shit. Right? I'm not saying like it makes me a bad person, or I'm bad, or I'm stupid, or something like that.
Well,
it's
that's
like
what
trying to recognize your shortcomings. Yeah. So
yeah,
as long as you have this sort of self empathy, you're able to forgive yourself and move forward. You can be a lot harder on yourself. You can be a lot more honest with yourself if you can just develop that skill.
Yeah,
you're human. Like everyone else. We don't know what the fuck we're doing here.
The word for that is tough love, isn't it?
It's just
isn't that a form of tough love?
Objectivity, I think, is what I would call it.
Well, I think, the objectivity is there, but I mean, a conventional word for what you're describing, from my perspective, is what is often called tough love. Where you're a piece of shit, and that can be a put down, but what you're saying is it can also be a source of encouragement.
Yeah, if you're being a piece of shit, then you're being a piece of shit, right? You have to own up to it and accept it, and you have to change it and move on.
And like you made a distinction too. You're a piece of shit, or you're a big failure, or whatever. That is, it says you, but it's not really referring to you in terms of your substance. It's more your behavior, actions. That.
Yeah.
But there's the
current configuration.
Underneath that is an intention. We go back now here where the word intention comes in. Or there's an attitude, which is intention, as an attitude. But the attitude is the intent is to support the success of the person. But here's the other thing too that we've just talked about is like in a coaching situation where a lot of times that's what the tough love is used to kind of shock or bump or get you unstuck by kicking your ass verbally. And but it also depends on how does it work for the coachee, the person being coached. That if we're coaching someone the way it works for us to be coached, maybe it doesn't work for them. So right. There we go again. Yeah. As to where that you're a piece of shit can be an expression of love and be supportive, or it can be an expression of put down and destroying the spirit of and not be coming from tough love. So there's another nuance, right?
Yeah, intentions make all the difference in the world, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that in how we set our intentions has more to do with where we end up than.
And that's one of the things I hate about woke culture, right?
Uh-huh.
The whole woke thing, one of their primary principles is intentions don't matter. The only thing that matters is the effect that you have on somebody else, right?
Well, and in some cases that's not even accurate. I mean, I would be okay if it was accurate, the effect I have, because my statement to someone is my statement, Now, how they interpret my statement, the meaning that their brain associates with my statement, that's the one that's getting them upset. That's not me.
Yeah, and there could be like there's a lot of identity nowadays associated in being a victim or being marginalized in
Yeah,
some way,
right,
and people are perceiving the world to try to validate and build that
right,
within themselves as victim identity, right?
right.
So of course, a lot of what you say is going to be like interpreted in a way that's most offensive,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
You're right.
Because
So it's like,
that's the job of the
yeah,
mind is to rationalize our to make us right is part of the function of the mind, and that often is as being right is a rationalization. It's a reasoning out, if then therefore, and so we're that's a bias that blinds us to being able to understand what the other person intended. But
right.
coming from being the other person, if I'm standing in those shoes and I notice that this person, if I say certain things, their brain is going to spin it a certain way. I speak unto them in accordance to their understanding. So a lot of times I will withhold what my comment is because I know they're not going to hear me, they're going to hear themselves.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and so that's part of how I navigate that situation.
Well, it's a big problem nowadays because a lot of people, I mean, I don't know if you've noticed, but we're in kind of a pivotal moment in history right now. I mean, in every way, basically. Geopolitically,
Yeah.
technology, AI. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
it's just
There's a
overwhelming, right?
lot of
Yeah.
there's a lot of we're on the cusp of a lot of things.
Right, and it can go sour or it can go very well, right? But I think now is the most important time for people to be able to be safe to speak their minds, right?
Uh-huh.
To give their opinions, but it's not. It's like the most dangerous time right now to speak your mind because if you offend somebody, you can get fired from your job. This cancer culture shit's real, right?
Yeah.
And so people are self-censoring now more than probably any time in American history. I would think it's a self-censorship. It's this fear of stigma. It's this fear of cancer culture and losing like your ability to like support yourself because you might have an opinion that it probably has the best intentions, but people want to interpret it in the most offensive way possible.
Right. Yeah. But then we have to be heads up that we don't begin to participate in the social norm of victimization, self-victimization. Because
Right.
what you just said there can be an invitation for me to make myself a victim of these other people that won't hear what I'm saying. They'll miss.
Yeah, but I would never try to cancel anyone or get them fired or try to impinge their free speech or anything like that. I would never do anything like that, no matter how offensive it was, even if it did offend me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's something I would never do. I mean,
Well,
unless like molesting kids or some shit,
What about the person who is trying to get you fired for what you said? It's like you're fine. Just let them keep doing what they're doing. You're not going to intervene and try to redirect to protect yourself from.
Yeah, but going out and doing the same thing they're doing to me isn't going to help anything.
Yeah. All right. Don't fight fire with fire.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. It's interesting time because there's a lot of people that I respect, like intellectuals I respect, that I've seen like just change big time in the last few years, right?
Yeah.
In all kinds of weird ways. But one of them is the self-censorship shit.
They drank the Kool-Aid.
Or they're just scared. They don't want to lose their livelihoods. They don't want to use their social media platforms or something like that for sticking their neck out, for something they believe in when people might attack them.
Yeah, right.
So a lot of people have just been sitting on the sidelines, staying quiet, even though they see some pretty horrible things happening, and they're not speaking out about it.
Yeah.
But this is the kind of time we live in right now. It's kind of it's a crazy time. If you're bored right now, you're not paying attention.
Yeah. Right. That's for sure. Well, here's my overview on all of that. All that you just referred to as interesting times that is challenging and for a lot of it's troubling. But it seems to me that we have to see the evidence of something to begin to start looking at something. That if it doesn't evidence itself, then we're going to leave it where it is. If it's being filtered out, and for a long time we have had kind of a consensus reality, a consensus consciousness around that how wonderful America is, and how this is idealism being projected onto the reality, where we've had a lot of stuff festering for a long time.
Oh yeah,
And
sure.
the influencers, and I don't mean just social media, but the political left, and the educational left, uh, the people who could have been doing something to address um, the disenfranchised, and I don't mean like just the economic and or racially disenfranchised, but the socially disenfranchised, the masses of people who have been designated to a class of people that aren't relevant to anything that's important.
Yeah, useless consumers,
And
right?
yeah, okay, sure, and yeah, or in the case of the poor, they're not very good consumers, so now which means they're not very good producers, and so they're even double useless. But that's been left since the 50s, gradually more and more over to the margin. That's why we call it marginalized by the intellectuals who supposedly had this enlightenment, this illumination back in the Enlightenment period, and they discovered certain things about rational thought and science and so on, and they have occupied a place of superior importance to the general masses now for a couple hundred years, and they missed it. They were too busy treating people the way they wanted to be treated instead of treating people the way the other people want to be treated. But eventually, that boil is going to lance itself. And that's what we have now, is that all of the trouble that's been brewing all this time is now largely through free speech. It's up, and we can smell the intellectual and social stench of what's been festering for a long time, and of course we're offended by the odor of that, and
Yeah, but
we don't know what to do with it yet. But to finish my point, though, is that this is part of us moving forward in a higher level of consciousness of a society that works for everyone. That's our ideal, right? Is life that works for
yeah, that's the
everyone.
ideal. Yeah,
And
but
so we
I
don't
think
know a
it's
lot.
being.
We don't know much about how to do that yet, but I think we're moving in that direction.
I don't know. Well, that the same class you're talking about, these intellectuals in like academia and stuff like that, I think they're hijacking legitimate issues. I think, and putting an ideological bent or spin on legitimate issues. I think, right? Because at the heart,
I see the evidence of that. Yeah,
at the heart of a lot of this stuff is like
goes back to intent.
it's socialism, really, is what it is. And I'm not talking about like I make the distinction between, like, let's say, like, I wouldn't call universal healthcare socialism, right? It might be a social program,
Right.
but socialism is an ideology at its root is about conflict between groups, right? So the nature of social interaction, the nature of how societies function, at root is conflict. Conflicts between minority groups, between majority groups, between men and women, between the haves and the have-nots. All that kind of stuff. And it's not a transactional sort of foundation. It's a foundation built on exploitation and conflict, right? And so I think that the world interpreted, I mean, obviously there is exploitation and there is conflict, but a lot of it is transactional too, and cooperative. I would say even when you really look at it, society over time becomes increasingly cooperative, right? And violence decreases over time. If we look at the last 30 or 40 years compared to the previous 100 or something years, it's way more safe. It's a way more peaceful time now than it's been probably any other time in history. There's way less people dying of malnutrition and stuff like that. We actually live kind of in the golden age, compared to the rest of human history right now.
Right.
But our minds are so fucking shot out that we think we're living in some terrible sort of the world's gonna end. That's apocalyptic sort of time, and I don't know. I think this narrative of the I don't know what you would call it, the woke social justice kind of crazy left wing socialist narrative, I think is pushing us towards conflict.
Is there?
But yeah, I think they're hijacking legitimate. Obviously, if you just focus on like slavery and the genocide of natives, right? So there's never been justice for that, right? We've never had any tribunals, or there's never been there was things promised to freed slaves at the time, the 40 acres and a mule, and there was all these agreements we had with the natives tribes, that the federal government never lived up to, right?
Yeah.
And so you're living with this multi-generational trauma, and it's not just slavery for blacks; it's also like segregation. You got Jim Crow, you got the CIA bringing in fucking drugs, during Iran-Contra and putting into the ghettos. They did that during Vietnam with heroin and stuff too. The assassination of black leaders and stuff like that. So there's been a constant assault on the African American community in the U.S. and also of natives, right? And so it's not like they're ancient crimes, that people should get over. There's like a continuous sort of trend of hostility towards minority groups in the U.S., and a lot of that has to do with the federal government. People don't want to admit that, but that's exactly what it is. So it's like, yeah, those are legitimate issues that we need to deal with. I think that there should be a criminal case, made public, evidence given, and I think that restitution should be paid. I like the word restitution rather than what's the other word they use for reparations? I like the word restitution better than reparations.
Yeah.
Because this is about justice, right? So there hasn't been a semblance of justice in this country for all the atrocities, let alone all the other stuff we did to other countries like Vietnam to Laos, Cambodia, all the fucking shit we're doing in the Middle East, all the stuff we've done in South America. Yeah, so America has wreaked havoc, for sure. And there are like tons of legitimate issues. But I think those legitimate issues are getting hijacked by an elite sort of intellectual class, under the influence of their own sort of, I think it's a dysfunctional ideology, right? That's going to create division, conflict, and destruction. Yeah. It's not going to bring people together, right?
Right. Well, that brings back to intent. And but listening to your explanation of all of the bad stuff in our history as a country, then my question is, how then shall we live? Not what the government should do or what the intellectuals should do, but how then shall we live? How then shall I live? And I
think fundamentally you have to maximize cooperation and minimize conflict, right, in order for societies to function.
Well, and that fits with what I just asked in that society is the aggregate. At any given moment, society and all that society is, the culture, etc., right? It is the aggregate. It is the aggregate of individual people making individual choices. So even the what the government should do is not a very productive pursuit because the government is a system and the system has no agency. What we need to do, what we need is for people with agency to use that agency for well-being. And so the question then is that I pose to myself and to you or to anyone that's listening here is, okay, here's the shit that's going down. And of course we know our perception can be inaccurate, but there's still shit going down regardless of how inaccurate we're looking at it. There's stuff that's working the way it's working. We don't like the way it's working. Maybe someone else likes the way it's working or whatever. But it seems to me the existential question always moving forward for the next step is, how then shall I live? And that brings us back to ethos, which is a little bit, to me, is a little bit like morality, but ethos is from the inside out. What are my moral values? What is my ethos? What criteria am I going to hold myself accountable to? You know, and then work at that trial by fire of being true to that ethos, and go back to the beginning of our conversation about working on a project like creating an enterprise and all of the trouble that comes from that ideal of pulling that ideal through to reality. Well, yeah, that's, as you said earlier, that's life. It's like we're always in a constant state of how then shall how then shall I execute my experience called life? Excuse me. How then shall I execute my experiment? Yeah, it's an experience, sure, but my experiment with my life, because that's what we're all doing. We're experimenting with our own existence. It seems to me
Right.
that that's unavoidable. Is that, you know, we're here, we're alive, we're making choices, we're taking actions, and for the most part, it's an experiment.
It kind of brings up what I said in the last podcast when we were talking about the inmates and how they're pretty much like 80% of them were in foster care. They all had
Yeah, I
beautiful
have some follow-up
childhoods, blah blah
statistics
blah.
on that one. But
Yeah.
continue.
So yeah, and then what I would tell them that is that I ask them if it's their fault, right? What happened to the kid? Obviously, it's not. And then I ask them, well, is it your responsibility? And then it
Yeah,
is,
yeah,
right?
that's a brilliant set of questions.
Yeah, responsibility and empowerment are interchangeable,
Uh
right?
huh.
And so that I think that works generally. So the more responsibility you take for your life, even the things that happen to you that you're a victim of, the more responsibility you take for all the cards that have been dealt to you, the more power you have as a person, right?
I think that's
so. I
true.
think that's what needs to be. That should be the mantra, not this fucking victim shit.
Well,
You know.
I think that that's a better mantra. But meanwhile, what we have is there are people who are experimenting with being the victim of self-victim, being a victim of themselves and assigning the cause of that victimization outside of themselves. But the source of it, where what they're being victimized by, is their interpretation. But they're not awake enough. They don't see that that's what they're doing, and so that's where they are. For now.
Right, you're asking how then should we live, right?
Yeah.
And so we can make some general, maybe, I think that's a good place to start. Having that attitude, seeing the world in that way, and yourself, and what shit that's happened to you.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say that's the answer. One answer to the question, at least a start.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
So what statistics were you talking about?
yeah, I'll come back to that in a second. But the absolute genesis of all of that we're talking about is intent. It's like, how then shall we live? Well, live with the intent to support well-being for self and others. Coming from a place of intention is to me that's the bedrock, because that's what I have the most control over, is what is my intention. Not that I have absolute control over it, because there's sometimes when I can't create that intention, or certainly I don't create that intention. But that's the one thing about myself that I have the greatest amount of agency with. It is my intention. And in this case, the intention is to support mutual well-being, this well-being of myself and others as an individual. So then as a cellular member of society, I'm one little organism in this larger organism. I'm doing what I can do to have society be more in the direction of peace, love, and understanding, well-being, for the part that I have agency over. So anyway, I guess I felt a need to explain that. I don't know if anybody needed the explanation, but
I want to go back. Can I say one thing about
yeah,
what you
the
said earlier?
statistics. I came across.
Wait. Before we
Oh.
get to that, I want to go back to something you said earlier. When you said the government, but I think the government has a role, because one of this big part of getting past and healing and stuff like that is justice, right? And so one of the functions of government is to serve justice. So if you get arrested, if you commit a crime, you get arrested. It's the government's responsibility to
Yeah,
deliver
but see,
justice, right? So in the same
yeah,
way, that's never been done for a lot of the shit that's happened in the past.
yeah,
We're still waiting for justice. Justice creates closure for people victimized, right? They want justice,
exactly.
right? So
Yeah,
until we can, deliver some sort of semblance of justice, we're never going to have a. It's always going to be an open wound, right?
yeah. I agree with you about the open wound, and the need. What's needed to heal that open wound is justice. I take exception to the idea that government is going to do that, because government has no agency. Only the people who play the role that's defined by the government. The government is an agreement. It's a structure. It's an intellectual concept in the form of an agreement, and people work with they animate that concept. That idea of government is animated by individual people making individual choices. It's only those individual people with agency that can then use the government for justice. Right now, it's being used to avoid justice in a lot of places. Now, it pursues justice in some places, but certainly on the issue of bringing closure to the Native American wound issue, and also the slavery issue, right? The people who animate the government, the people with agency that can do something about the justice, they're only doing what they're doing, which is very incomplete in my opinion. So my point is that when we talk about government should do something, we're saying an idea should do something. And the idea of government doesn't have
government. The government is composed of individual people, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's the people. But I think that we need. I think it might work better to elevate our consciousness about how to be more effective if we name that which can cause the effectiveness, the part that has agency. So government is a thing that we've constructed, but and it's a tool, and it can be used for good or ill. But it's the people with agency that are using the government for whatever it is they're using the government for. And I think we need to name the humanity, the humanness, the agency. The people with agency is what we need to refer to as who we want to do something different. That's just my point.
Okay. Yeah.
Is that I get frustrated when I see people doing things that, from my perspective, it's like that ain't going to happen. But then it's my perspective, and I could totally be mistaken.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a certain amount of transference, right, invested in our societal structures.
Yeah.
Right, and so in order for society to function, a lot of these processes has to be maintained. And
sure.
So,
yeah.
And it's just on an emotional level, something, since the psychological transference exists of transferring agency and like the need to justice to institutions, right? There's something they have a lot of power to affect you on an emotional level because they represent something official, right?
Yeah.
Something happening in reality, right? Yeah.
It goes back to the symbolic reality thing that we've talked about in the past. So I've got something I need to be moving in the direction of here. We've got about an hour and 20 minutes here. Is this a good place for us to wrap it up?
Sure. What were we going to say about the statistics really quick?
Oh, yeah. The statistics is that I came across on the prison population that comes out of foster care. And it's considerably less than the number you had. I don't remember the exact number, but probably closer to 27% of the prison population is out of the foster care. That doesn't reduce.
Yeah. Well, I did a study in Washington State is what I was referring to. And it's not foster care too. It's like childhood institutions. It could be group home. It could be the juvenile justice system, foster care. All that. It's institutions that deal with minors.
Right, and if we include the juvenile justice system, it's like, yeah, I'm sure that that's probably really significant. The number of adult incarcerated people is a high percentage of those people have been through the juvenile system. A high percentage of the juvenile people that are in the juvenile system, a high percentage of those will probably end up in trouble later too.
Yeah, but the majority of those kids have also experienced extreme abuse. I mean,
Well, and
yeah,
yeah, and if your statistic was supporting the fact of abuse and how abuse ends up with criminal lifestyle, yeah,
no, it's a
the
combination from early childhood trauma and interactions with juvenile institutions that creates the pipeline to prison. That's what I'm saying. There's something unique about the combination of those two.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that warrants the gravity that the 70% lends to it.
It was like 80% was the study. I forget. Yeah.
So there it is, another example of it didn't mean what I thought it meant.
Well, I probably said foster care, but I mean, yeah.
Well, yeah,
that's what I mean.
And
yeah,
I can rationalize my misunderstanding because you used foster care instead of the juvenile system. But the point is that my experience of what you were saying was inaccurate, and it doesn't matter if it's inaccurate because of my misinterpretation or because you used a word that had a different meaning. It doesn't matter what the source of the error in perception is. It's just an example of there it is.
Yeah, the underlying principle still remains. So, for what I'm saying,
exactly, right, and I think that it has appropriate weight. And then another thing that could have been just happening is that I have a tendency to overweight incidentals, things that, I pick up on little details that don't really have a material impact on what's going on, the purpose of the activity. It's like I'm a teacher with the red marker.
Right.
I get carried away sometimes, I think, but maybe not. Anyway, we're headed to see family up north, and so that's what we're going on to.
All right.
From here. So I want to thank everybody for checking this out, and leave comments, give us some feedback so that we have some idea as to, does this have anything to do with you? Or are we just, if we're just shouting in the dark? And of course, we want to remind everybody to click the follow and all that, the bell,
subscribe,
and
all that stuff.
Yeah, all that good stuff.
All right.
So I guess that's it, folks, huh?